All right. So let's then get into the video game news. And while we always
Yes.
talk about games being released constantly, well, PlayStation has decided to take some of their upcoming games off the schedule. Sony has canceled two unannounced PlayStation games, one of which was to believe been a God of War game. But before you panic, this was not a Santa Monica Studios God of War game.
No.
Would have been a live service God of War game. According to Bloomberg's Jason Schreier's report, that Sony canceled live service games in development at Bend Studios and Bluepoint Games, a report that was then confirmed by a Sony spokesperson. While Schreier's article doesn't describe the games in detail, he then took to Blue Sky, as we all do now, to confirm that the game Bluepoint was working on was a live service God of War title. Sony's spokesperson confirmed that both games had been canceled, quote, following a recent review, close quote, but stressed that neither studio would be closed down as a result of the cancellations, which is the best part of
Yeah.
this news.
Recent review, you could summarize as Concord.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is kind of two parts, right? Because you could go back before Concord and you had some rumors swirling about other live service games in the Sony stable being canceled. Like, remember the multiplayer live service expansion for The Last of Us Part 2?
Even though that's supposed to get its own standalone game and then
Yep.
goes completely shelved and canceled.
Yep. This was probably part of that original stable because
Hmm.
a couple years ago there was this big push from Sony that was like, we're going to make 11, we're going to buy Bungie, and we're going to have the Bungie team help the rest of these like teams make live service games like Destiny. We're going to make it a huge thing. Well, they've been dropping like flies ever since. None of these games besides Concord came out. And this is just further news once they had Concord to use as an example that they just decided to cancel the rest of them. So at this point, I don't know if any of their original live service game ideas have survived. It may be just completely a dead initiative at PlayStation now. Um, what do you think, as a God of War fan, what would you have thought of a live service game in the God of War universe?
Reading about some scuttlebutt of people's theories. Because God of War came out with the DLC Valhalla, which was a very roguelike God of War experience where you're running through the different levels of God
Yeah.
of War and battling the different types of monsters and ultimately like gaining more treasures to level up. That would have been more in vein like that, but with different party members within the God of War universe. So you could have someone play as Atreus, you could have someone play as Freya, you could have someone play as Thor and do a 4-team gauntlet run. And that would
Hmm.
be more of like the live service game aspect, which sounds interesting because you have the
Yeah.
different fighting styles and tactics, and they have a plethora of villains and monsters to go through as well. So something
Yeah.
like that could have been on the docket,
And
especially
yeah,
if they want to go through more Norse mythology and bring in characters that they haven't brought in before, like Hela, goddess of death, and be like, oh, you want to escape death? Well, get through to Hela, and you
yeah.
and your team of four would armor up and level up and bow through the gauntlet that is escaping hell.
Yeah, and you could have imagined them expanding the loot system, which was already kind of that RPG style,
Mhm.
to have more drops for four
All the
people to
chests
share.
already
Yeah,
there implemented with
right.
the rarity chests already implemented. So you have all the graphics kind of in place for something like this.
Yeah.
But as we saw that, yeah, it can be good skinned, but how much of that is going to be player retention once you
Yeah.
beat through it? Once you have your squad and you run through it two, three times, how many of that are you going to run back through?
I think Concord may have just scared them from the idea now. And like even a franchise as strong as God of War is not a guarantee that people are going to that an audience is going to find the game and find it quickly enough for them to start making the money that they probably planned on making with this kind of thing. All of this is about the money. Like they wanted to make a live service game because it's an endless money printing machine if it works. but that's a big if. And Concord proved that it's not going to work all the time.
Right, especially with original IPs, which I can understand why they'd want to go with God of War or The Last
Right.
of Us, because those are established Sony IPs.
But now even that's not good enough for them. And so they went back to the drawing board, it appears. And now who knows what they're going to do
So
now.
I don't think it's uh necessarily Concord that kind of doomed all of these. I think you go one game prior to this. The
Hmm.
Crash Bandicoot 4v4 Arena Womped or whatever it was.
Well, that was not a Sony, that was
No,
not a
but that was
PlayStation Studios game.
right, but that was still like a PlayStation mascot branded.
Well, to be fair, Crash
Okay,
has
yes,
not
I
been a
know what you're gonna
PlayStation
say. Yes.
mascot in like almost 2 decades at this point.
Yeah. But still
Oh,
people like
over two
associate
decades.
with them.
Yeah, yes. I know what you mean, though. Generally speaking, they've been fewer, the successes in that field have been fewer and far between. You pretty much just have Fortnite to look at as an example of one that's really, really clicked. And Sony's own Helldivers 2. But as people are very like quick to point out, that again, not a PlayStation Studios game initially. That was a sequel to Helldivers, which was an independent game. And so the scope of that project is completely different. But when you look at it as a multiplayer success for Sony, it's very easy for people to bunch it in with these other games. But really, it's a different thing.
And
So,
I know people
yeah.
are like screaming at us like, what about Marvel's rivals?
But that's also not a. We're just right now talking about PlayStation Studios output. They would love to have a
Mhm.
Marvel Rivals, but the reason why Marvel Rivals works is the Marvel part. People flocked to it because it was these familiar characters that they love that they could play as. It was free to play, and third, it had all those characters from the jump. You do not have to unlock them. You don't have to pay for them. This is why Marvel Rivals worked. It was a perfect storm of great ideas that clicked immediately. Concord didn't have the IP recognition, and you had to pay 50, $60 for it. The worry about God of War, I'm sure, from them is that they would probably refuse to sell that free to play. They would absolutely charge $60 to $70 for that game. And that already leaves it potentially dead in the water.
Right, because we just saw what happened with Kill the Justice League, Suicide
Right.
Squad.
Yeah. A great example, also. Yeah. So anyway, we don't need to beat this horse to death.
It's
It's
okay,
already
PlayStation
dead.
already put the horse to pasture.
Exactly. But yeah, no, not surprising at all. I am not shocked by this news. And yeah, you're right. The best part about the story is these people still get to work.
Yes.